Kind of a funny thing happened. Yesterday I was out here and I did a video. And just talking the way I tend to do. And I kind of had an interesting thing. Like you've seen on these shows where you start, these like detective shows where they have like a map on a wall and they're putting pins in and then they're hooking strings up and they're trying to, and all of a sudden they realize, oh, I see now. I see where that kind of happened to me. I did the video, and in the middle of it I kind of thought, okay, I kind of see where. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I won't put this up. I wanted to look into this a little further, this epiphany that I had. And I understand. You always see like, they are going to do this or they are, and people will say, well, who is they? Well, you don't know. I mean, there's some mysterious dark group out there doing stuff and you can't quite put your finger on them. But now I know who they are. But it was a surprise. Okay, go back, like say 2013. Ukraine is going to get into the EU. That's the theory. They've been working on this. The EU is all for this. This is just, everything's great. But when it came time to sign the papers, the president of Ukraine backed out. He said, no, I can't do this. And he kind of snubbed the EU. Well, the EU don't like to be snubbed. And he was the democratically elected president of the country. Well, they had to put an end to him. So they overthrew the government. That's where we always say vaguely the West and some certain European powers, it's always a little vague as to who actually pulled this maneuver. Though they want to make it sound like it was a popular uprising, it wasn't. This was a manufactured thing. But they overthrew their elected government and put in this puppet. Well, the problem, in order to do this, in order to swing this deal and still stay out of the light of the thing, they ended up enlisting the aid of all the real radicals that were in Ukraine, your neo-Nazis, and so it ended up with the new government they got in, who was willing to go into the EU. That was the whole idea, get them into the EU. But then the EU found that this new government was so corrupt, they couldn't use them. And that's where like the Bidens were getting their money, and everybody was, it was just a free-for-all of corruption. So the EU had second thoughts. They thought, well, we gotta get this situation straightened out and like get rid of these neo-Nazis and stuff before we let them in. So that was a holdup. So they got rid of that guy because, like I say, nothing but corruption. And they got Zelensky in there, and their thought was, okay, we can work with this guy. We'll get this Ukraine into the EU. But it was no better with him. You still got all the corruption, you got all the neo-Nazis. It's just a mess. And then, when this had happened, of course, Crimea was gone, those two provinces were gone. The EU wasn't getting the deal that they thought they were getting. So they, it's funny, the EU is a funny thing. You think they're, the European Union, that they're a trading bloc, but they're so much more than a trading bloc. They were to encourage free trade between these countries. I mean, there's a reason that Britain got out of the EU. It's the only one that's ever got out of the EU, but for good reason. But they had a hell of a fight to get out, and they really are kind of under their thumb yet to this day. That's a strange organization, but all the time, they've been kind of flying under the radar. They tend to use NATO like as an enforcer, but they do have their own military component that works much the same way as NATO in that they pull the military from all of their other countries in the bloc and form a force out of them. But they have never had to use them. They can always use NATO. But this is a problem this time because try as they might, they can't come up with an excuse to use the NATO forces. So for the first time, they're thinking of using their own forces, which won't have the restrictions that NATO does, because NATO in theory is a defensive force. EU doesn't have to do that. They're free to do whatever the hell they want. So, they kept pushing and pushing on Russia, trying to get a fight going, because they've got this problem in Ukraine. The corruption, the neo-Nazis, they got to get them out of there. They don't want the Ukraine as it is. So Zelensky keeps saying, oh God, I want to be able to let us in, and the EU keeps saying, hey, it's not your time. They have to clean us up first. So they pushed Russia to the point where Russia felt that they had to go in and clean this up. And this is great for the EU. You've got these corrupt politicians and neo-Nazis battling against the Russians, so they could sit back. And now they are sitting back. They've got their force. They keep feeding arms and money into Zelensky to keep him going to the point where, if they were to both tear each other apart, this would be great for the EU. This is what the EU wants. And then they'll go in later and clean things up. Whatever is left over. They can't lose in this deal so far. Unless if Russia comes out on top, that would be a bad case for the EU, but still they can stand back and say, we'll bide our time, we'll get a chance yet. Oh, it's funny because I never even looked at the EU as being the cornerstone of the problems that were going on. Not only there, but all over the world. It's funny now you see, we've had Soros poking around and all this stuff, and now Soros is commenting on the situation over there. And he is definitely on the side of the EU. It was funny at one point in there where, they love Nothing like refugees. Refugees they can handle. They're useful to them. So all these refugees are flooding into Poland, and all of a sudden the British say, well, who is not really in the EU anymore, but the British said, we'll gladly give them work permits and we'll bring them over here and they can have jobs and we'll make use of them. And the EU slapped them, because this is a thing that the EU has been brewing up. And the feast isn't ready yet. And here the British were kind of picking in the pot, so they got their fingers slammed. In time, but not, it isn't ready yet. But the feast will come. It's a wild thing, it's weird, like say now, like I said, the EU has been providing all this, propping Zelensky up, keeping him going until something happens, one way or the other, and then they can go in. But now they were going around from all of their, like Poland and all of these places, picking up all the old fighter jets. It's like a rummage sale, like a block sale. They're picking them all up, and they're going to pass them on to the Ukrainians. Now this is not a give to the Ukrainians. This is, we will finance this and you owe us. The Ukrainians are running up a hell of a debt in this thing that there's no way they'll ever be able to pay. They're selling their soul to the EU. And they don't see that. But funny things, but, like say the EU now, for a trading organization, has been throwing a lot of weight around lately. That, like I say, it totally surprised me. Like now, they're shutting down all these banks. They can crush a country just with economic maneuvers. That's why, though we aren't in the EU, or England either, but we are under their thumb because they could crush us very easily. And of course, like now we have a president who is, they have all the goods on all of that went on. They could take him down in a moment if he didn't agree with, he's got to go along with this program or he's done. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there. It's amazing when you start putting it all together. Like I say, like pins on a board, and all of a sudden, there's the pattern. But all I want to say is keep your eyes on maneuvers from the EU, because they aren't a simple little trade organization. They are very powerful. When you think of your New World Order, that's them. That's who it is. The people that you always wonder who's working in the shadows, it's the EU. Funny thing. But it all comes together. So I don't know, like there are things going on in Ukraine now that, well, that are really going to be bad. But like say, they are sending in the Chechens. The Russians are going to send in the Chechens. I saw this like a week ago. The Chechen army was all in formation in this big area, and they were telling Putin, send us in. Give us the word, we'll go in. And they are vicious fighters. They haven't used them because they're trying to avoid civilian casualties. They're trying to get the civilians out of there so they can deal with this corrupt neo-Nazi military. And at the same time, Ukraine is inviting every bit of trash into the country. They're arming the people out of their prisons. I mean, people that were in for murdering people, like the one guy for murdering somebody by throwing acid on them. And now he's got his own unit and he's going out. And now they have got a problem with looters. And they are just shooting the looters on sight. But, and a thing came up yesterday, and I haven't heard more about this, but they have been accused of using phosphorus because some of those Grad rockets, you know, the multiple, they had some of the old phosphorus rounds left over from way back in the Soviet days before they were outlawed, because they are not to be used. I would have thought they'd dispose of them, but they have them, and evidently they were using them. You know, that's a bad step. You know, but like when I say, you know, a lot of this stuff you're not going to find out, or the people there won't find out until it's too late, then maybe they'll figure this out. But the EU, you know, they shut down a lot of media in Ukraine, but they also shut down RT. Now the EU went so far, well, they shut it down in England, but the EU has shut it down all over Europe. So they're not getting the information that they should to be able to form, you know, an informed opinion of what's going on. So now they're kind of free to do whatever they want. So a lot of their moves now are becoming more apparent because they don't have to hide them, because the people won't know, you know. But keep an eye on the moves made by the EU. They are not simply a trading bloc. There's something a lot bigger going on there. But watch them. Just pay attention to what's going on there. Who's making these moves? Because when you start putting this all together, it becomes very obvious. And if they aren't stopped by Russia, the only other power able to stop them is China. Like I say, we're under their thumb. England is under their thumb. All of Europe is under their control. So if Russia doesn't come out on top of this, it's a funny deal. But pay attention to the EU. Their hands are not clean in this. They aren't in it for the good of the Ukrainian people. They're looking, there's a lot of workers, there's a lot of land, there's a lot of resources, all of which the EU wants. And they're going to get them if they can. As cheap as they can. They will fight the Russians to the last Ukrainian. And this is a good way to dispose of all of their neo-Nazis. I mean, they're all over Europe. They all run into Ukraine now. If the Russians take them out, it's no loss to them. The EU would be better off without them. but that's who they are. When you say they are doing this or they are doing that, some anonymous group working in the background, it's the EU. Who'd have thunk it?